Gary, thank you for coming on to Timely Conversations. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
We've talked about so much about your journey from UK and then migrating to Australia, and growing up in your 20s over there, and then starting your businesses, your various businesses. Let's begin with the introduction of your journey to starting with Specsavers over in the UK, before the expansion of stores into Australia.
Yep. So I started my journey with Specsavers started back in 2007, and I just moved back from overseas from a previous business venture. And I just wanted a bit of a change really in my work sort of life balance. Didn't want to be doing my late nights anymore, so I decided to move into a retail 9-to-5 job. And with that, it was just a very different industry to be in, but I saw the opportunities being in that industry. Started off with them as literally just as a part-timer, just working a couple of days a week. Moved my way up, sort of expanded into sort of full-time work. Quickly sort of rose up and became an assistant manager over 2 locations, and eventually 3 locations for the same partnership. And then at that point, and I've been doing that job for probably about 2 years at that point. Prior to that, obviously I had other business management sort of experience, so pretty much my management of people and my people management skills helped me in that role develop really quickly. And then they saw the potential, so they moved me up pretty quickly through that. After that, I then started to sort of notice that the stores, there was opportunities within the stores as a partnership in the UK, but the way the model works over there is you have to put a lot of money into just even to be considered to be a partner over there, because it's an established business that's been around. Back then it had been around for 30 years. And I sort of saw that number, and it was pretty high in the pounds, you're talking sort of £10,000, £15,000 to be put on a waiting list, and I didn't have that money, and I was like, well, what other opportunities are there? And literally it was a bit like fate, where within 3 months of having that thought, they started to expand into Australia. And when I saw that, I was like, right, okay, well, this is definitely an opportunity for me. They needed new partners, or they needed experienced business people at least. A lot of the UK partners didn't want to leave their positions purely because they got comfortable, and obviously they was earning really good money over there. The contracts are structured very differently, and they just didn't want to leave. So I saw that opportunity and I decided to make the move.
You were given the very important role of expanding Specsavers due to your fantastic, people management skills. In 2009, you mentioned they came and opened 100 stores across Australia.
Yeah.
Now, what were some of the hurdles and smooth sailing moments you faced during this expansion?
So with that expansion, it was a very sort of ambitious sort of move by Specsavers, because they'd never opened that many stores in such a quick sort of succession. So it was 100 stores in 100 days. With the team that we had when I was based in WA, we had a team of 5 people, and literally that was it, coming over from the UK. And our job was literally to go into a store or to go into a potential location, help with the recruitment of the team, help with obviously the sort of education of the partners coming in and learning the systems, learning the processes, and from that, literally our job was literally to give them a guide and give them sort of a time frame of how things needed to be done and when it needed to be done by. We would then go in there for about a week, open the store, let it run, and then move on to the next one. And over the space of 12 months, I was probably involved in maybe about 20 to 30 stores in that expansion, because the 100 stores over 100 days wasn't just in WA, it was 100 stores across Australia, New Zealand. So we had our own little sort of network that we had to look after.
Well, you must have travelled a lot.
Yeah, so we travelled to all over the place in WA,
Would you say on average a few days per store?
Yeah, it was pretty much like the roster, the rotating roster that we had was literally like I said, there was 4 or 5 of us doing that job, and we would each spend 2 to 3 days in each place, and then move on to the next place, give them a little bit of a sort of a homework, I suppose, and sort of say, right, okay, well, this is what I want you to set to achieve over the next week or two, and then when we come back, we'll address that and see where we've got to with obviously either expanding the team or expanding sales, top line, expanding profit, whichever one it may be, but we'd give them a different task every week, and then we'd just sort of readdress that.
Oh, you've had to take care of the human resources side of things,
Pretty much, yeah.
The management,
yeah,
and the salespeople.
Yeah, because the team that we had in Australia at that point, even back in Port Melbourne, the support office was really small. It was pretty much a skeleton staff.
Will they make the bulk of the funds through selling spectacles and lenses?
Yes, yeah, pretty much, yeah. So most of the cost that we sort of see comes from pretty much, yeah, from buying and selling spectacles. We make some money from contact lenses as well, but it's not as big of a business, I would say, than what the glasses is. We now have online presence as well, so like with the online side of it, like we've literally grown that, and that's expanded massively.
As a UK-based optical retailer, how does Specsavers' way of doing business influence your approach to running Specsavers in Australia?
Okay, I mean, with that, like it's very similar, because selling glasses is selling glasses and people are people. The model works pretty much in the same way, but I learned a lot of stuff from my previous partners that was in the business in the UK, and sort of saw that delegation was definitely the best way to do it and build that team pretty quickly. And obviously give them roles and responsibilities, and yeah, just basically accountability through the team.
Yeah. Now, many entrepreneurs talk about, the journey from earning the first $1,000 a month, and then quickly reaching 100K, and then eventually to the millions. At what point did you feel you had a breakthrough in your journey with Specsavers or your other ventures and or investments?
Well, with Specsavers, like my first sort of breakthrough, I suppose, came within the first month, pretty much, of opening the business, because we went from like a negative sort of turnover to literally we was making sort of $40,000 to $50,000 a week. The first month that we was there, I think we made close to $200,000 that month, and yeah, it had gone from a negative to $200,000 within 4 weeks. So yeah, so that to me was definitely a turning point where I was like, right, this can work. Like this obviously can work, and with the entry into that business being so low, yeah, it was a no-brainer that this was going to work from day one.
And what does your day-to-day running the business entail in the hospitality industry when you open the bar in Spain, as well as the Specsavers side of things?
It's very different. Like obviously, that like being in hospitality is very different to being in the retail space that I'm in now. So hospitality, it was literally all on me, because it was a very small sort of business, and it was literally just myself being in that business on a day-to-day basis, 7 days a week. Yeah. 10, 12 hours a day. This is obviously a bit more relaxed. I've got a team of 20 people, and yeah, it wasn't always like that, obviously, but yeah, the team of 20 people now makes my job a lot easier, where it's literally, they've all got their own responsibilities within the team, and obviously they all report to someone, and then obviously that line manager then reports to me.
How much money did you think you needed to first start opening the bar in Spain, as opposed to joining forces with Specsavers as
well, opening a bar, obviously that was a big capital expenditure. Like with that one, like that cost us close to, like obviously securing the lease and then building the equipment, because the bar that we actually had over there was that was a specialized cocktail bar. So the place that we bought had nothing in it; it was an empty shell. So we had to like manufacture the frameworks and all the sinks and all the backing boards, everything needed to be manufactured for that place. So that cost a lot of money. My dad was involved with that because he's an engineer. So like he did a lot of fabrication work when he was younger, and he knew people that did that. So they ended up helping him with that. So we saved a little bit of money, but like overall expenditure on that project was probably close to about £100,000.
Yeah. So just interior designing, the space, and the bar space,
yeah, just
fixtures and fittings.
Fixtures and fittings, like basically all your stuff, and plus your stock as well. So your stock's very expensive as well when you've got high-end spirits and stuff like that as well. But yeah, like that overall project was, the entry into that was a lot more than what it was for Specsavers. Yeah.
Okay.
Like your average entry into a Specsavers now, because it's an existing business, you're talking probably about $500,000, obviously, but that's loaned. Whereas the money that we put into the bar wasn't loaned. That was like our own money that we had to find from somewhere.
For Specsavers, about the loaning part, you mentioned about because you weren't a citizen of Australia.
Yeah.
All right, but then eventually they still approved of your loan.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate?
So they approved on that. Like, so basically, my story behind that was went to a bank, and I wouldn't obviously anyone. I wouldn't say anyone should do this, but like literally, it was like obviously if you don't ask or you don't tell, you don't get, I suppose, or you don't ask, you don't tell. And literally went to a bank. The bank rejected me for the initial loan. An external bank that I don't normally bank with, so I went to my bank that I traditionally bank with. Had obviously a credit history with them for like 4 years or so that I'd been sort of transacting with in Australia. Went to them, saw a poster on the wall for a credit card, and I was like, right, okay, well, how am I going to get this money for this business? I'd already had the previous discussion a few weeks prior to this with Specsavers, and they sort of said to me, if you can find the $5,000 that we need as an initial deposit to buy this business, we'll obviously fund the rest of it. So the initial purchase of that business was $20,000. They was going to fund $15,000 via a director's loan, and the other $5,000 I had to find from somewhere. My other partner that I was coming on board with, he already had the money in place, so he was coming from an existing Specsavers in the UK, but I didn't have that luxury, so I had no money at the time. So I went to the bank, went through the standard process of asking for a credit card. Like, they asked me all these questions. At no point in that interview did they actually ask me if I was a citizen, so I didn't tell them. They granted me the credit card. The following day, I received the credit card in my account, basically got the money, transferred it over to Specsavers. Day after that, I had my business.
I think it's great that they only checked about serviceability. They clearly knew that you could pay them back. So
Exactly.
I feel like the citizen part probably doesn't really matter. We're all citizens of a global world.
Other people's
We
money
should
is
be
the greatest
considered sane.
invention. Yeah.
I think so. I think so. So I'm glad you was able to return the funds back within a month. You mentioned.
Yeah, within a month.
Yeah,
Yeah. So literally just paid the money back, done, easy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What was there a pivotal moment in your optical retail business where you implemented a strategy that led to significant positive change?
I would say probably just employing more people, to be honest. Like that was a significant shift that we had within the business, where it was sort of like for the first 3 years that we was in that business, myself and my partner, we was working 7 days a week. And it was literally us two and 3 other team members, and that was it. And it was tough. Like, it was very, very tough. Like, we literally worked late nights, weekends, everything that we could. My business partner's boys was born, and the following day he was back at work. Like, so he had twins, and like literally he was in hospital. We both went to the hospital for the birth, everything like that. Following day, back at work at 9 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of commitment to that business early on, and we sort of saw that, and we was like, we can't like basically sustain this. This is not a sustainable model. We need to find other ways to do it. And literally, we just sort of said, look, we're gonna have to bite the bullet back, employ more people. We employed sort of like a core team of another 5 people, and within probably, I would say, in the space of about 6 to 12 months of obviously developing those team members for the right level of training, our business grew exponentially. Like it grew massively. So our average month we'd be looking at sort of around about 200k. Once we sort of brought them people in, we was looking at sort of 250 to 300k a month.
Of salaries you had to...
Top line sales was like sort of $300,000 from 200 as an average. So so it grew massively. Yeah.
What do you have to pay a top salesperson?
Obviously we give them their normal industry wage, and then we incentivize them on top of that. So it really depends on the person to person. Some people, top performers, earn a lot of money. People that don't really want to sort of work and don't really, and just want to come in and just do their work and just show up, they get paid what they're worth. Like, and I believe that in general in life, you get paid what you're worth. Like, so if you work harder, and I'm not saying kill yourself and work 7 days a week like I did, but work harder and work smarter with it, you'll get rewarded.
But yes, so you reward, incentivize.
I incentivize them, obviously, which is because we're not in hard sales as such. It's not like we're selling double glazing windows or anything like that. We're selling glasses. It's not like it's a hard sell. People need them. We give them sales in general is literally, it's just a a process where it's literally someone's got a problem, you've got a solution.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your problem? Right, okay, I can't see across the road. Right, okay, I've got a solution for that. There you go, there's a pair of glasses. Do you want it or not? It's not that difficult, and it's not hard selling.
But you can recruit as a business owner, right?
Yeah,
You
we
don't
can
have to
recruit
listen to
people.
Specsavers. Like, it's
No,
not like
no,
Specsavers
so-
send you staff.
No, so they don't send us staff. They can recruit people for us if we want them to, but generally I don't normally do that myself. Like personally, my belief is that I don't like to recruit people from other businesses, as in other optical businesses. I would rather recruit someone that's outside of the business, never had any experience, and then I can like sort of mold them into the way that I want them to work. And generally, even with the team that we have, when we are recruiting people, my recruitment process is literally the team decide who comes on board, not me.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is I will do the initial interview, obviously, and then I'll have my manager, she'll also perform like an interview with them as well. If they sort of get to that point and they seem like they're going to gel well with the dynamic of the team, then I'll then sort of bring them in for a trial day. And then at the end of that day, I'll get feedback from each individual team member, and I'll be like, right, okay, was this person suitable? Do you think they'll work? Yes or no? Right, okay, yes, why? No, why? And it's pretty much that simple. And I don't make the final decision, they do, because I don't want to force people into the team, and it disrupts the dynamics. And that happens in every workforce. You'll get a manager that's at the top, and they'll make the decision and force someone into a team, and it's not always the right decision for the team.
It's probably the right fit.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned about dynamic and team morale and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely want to find someone that wants to be there, that enjoy the work,
Definitely.
and that collaborate well with the remaining team members.
Yeah.
Now, on a good day or month, you mentioned you could make anywhere between about $10,000 to about $16,000.
Yeah.
On a not so
From profit.
lucrative,
Yeah.
from profit, right?
Yeah.
If it's a seasonal downturn, what are some of the figures we're looking at? So what is a moment that is slightly lower than what you normally see, and
Like
how do you combat that? Like when it goes low, you mentioned that at the beginning you had to lend money from the bank
Yeah.
to kickstart the business. So when it does go low, how do you deal with it? And do you sit tight and then wait for another few months, or do you instantly react to it? Are you reactive? Are you one of these reactive?
I don't think you can be reactive. I feel like you've sort of got to be proactive with stuff like that. You can't be a reactive person and deal with it as it comes. You've got to sort of prepare for that. And it's sort of like make hay while the sun shines sort of thing. Like literally, we will have really, really good months, and then we'll have terrible months. It's part of business. You have peaks and troughs. So you've just got to take it. And some months, yes, we might not make as much. So yeah, maybe we're not sort of obviously making $10,000-$15,000 a month. Maybe we're only making $1,000, but it's just one of them. It's just one of them things. It's part of business, and obviously you'd like to think moving forward that obviously you're going to have more good months than you are bad months, because otherwise, what's the point in opening a business? If you can't be optimistic about that, then you've got to sort of assume that that's the way the economy rolls. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down.
Do you think there's triggering points that you look for, moments that, okay, there's a downturn? And you mentioned it's a really good point, which is be proactive. Do you go in there and look at the financial statements and go, okay, we need to do something
so
better
we sort of know, we know when our down months are going to be. So we have like sort of generally about 3 points in a year that we know that it's going to be quieter. So historically it's always quiet, so the data shows us that. So normally the first one within the sort of tax year would be probably around about July, which is like it just is for us. It's sort of generally a quieter time. September, and then March.
Are the quieter moments?
Generally, they're the quietest months that we have normally. Yeah. So what we generally do in those points, like a bit of an insider tip: come in and get your glasses then, because there'll generally be a sale on.
Can you renegotiate terms with Specsavers?
No.
Okay.
No, it's take it or leave it pretty much, yeah. So you have like a heads of terms that's normally about 200 pages long, and their sort of view on that is literally, there's your heads of terms, you can take this to legal advice and they can give you whatever advice you want, but you are not changing any of those terms within that contract. The contract is airtight for both parties obviously, but yeah, there's no way that you can change those terms.
Do you get requests by head office to go and train fellow,
I did. Like obviously when that was my first job when I first started in the business, then when I first moved to Australia. But prior to that, no, I don't do that. I don't do that anymore. Sorry, should I say? Yeah, it's not something that's really in my remit anymore.
Yeah. Some cool, interesting background information about you. Your daughter, super cute. When you show me the photo. Now you mentioned you've set up a trust for your wife and daughter.
Yep.
How do you, reinvest the gains from your promontory business to the family trust?
So generally, how my sort of structure works is pretty much I own the business itself through a family trust, and it also has a corporate trustee attached to that as well, which is normally the standard entity that you have, and it's just a discretionary trust. So literally, like the money that gets filtered into that trust, it can get filtered out to whoever you want, and at tax time you decide where that money is sort of allocated to. Normally the way it works with my structure, or the way that I've sort of set it up anyway, is literally like sort of a 50 10 20 20. So like what I mean by that is like 50% of the money that we obviously make, that gets spent on expenses, so your standard sort of stuff like your rent, your mortgage, bills, whatever that may be, like obviously food and water, and fuel, and then I usually have a 10% that I pay myself. So I've always sort of been in that mindset of pay myself first. So 10% of my earnings come to me, and they just like literally sit in my own account, and I can spend that on whatever I want. So I got this idea from a guy called Scott Pape, who's the Barefoot Investor, and literally he has a 4 bucket rule. So it's literally like you have an expenses, a splurge, a smile, and a fire extinguisher. And obviously my 50% is my expenses, my 10% is my splurge, my 20% is my smile. So my smile, that 20% gets split up between my wife and my daughter, because that makes me smile. And obviously it's something that obviously I help to sort of help secure their future as well. And then the other 20% is obviously a fire extinguisher.
Like emergency fund.
Exactly, yeah. So, but even with a fire extinguisher, I have sort of a limit to what that will generally be. So it's normally between $1,000 and $2,000. Once it gets past that point, I'll then sort of probably take that money out, because when in real life do you need more than, like people will sort of give the term 3 months, 6 months sort of emergency fund. You don't really need that in reality. When have you ever sort of had a time where you've got to use 3 months of your sort of income to pay on an emergency?
Yeah, probably not 3 months.
Doesn't really happen.
Like a car, needs servicing.
Maybe you get a repair, something like that.
Or something.
Yeah, but you're not really going to use it. So generally what I do is once I get to a certain point, I'll take that money out, and that will then go into my investment fund.
Very sensible.
Yeah.
If you do that. Now, you are into investing properties. We had a lot of fun talking about that.
Yeah.
You mentioned you rent where you like to live and then buy where it makes sense.
Yeah.
Can you please elaborate on that theory?
Well, I live here, near the airport, obviously. And I rent here.
We've done so well. This is the first plane that's gone past.
I saw him going that way, and then I was like, But no, I rent in this area because it's a nice area, and I buy in more affordable suburbs around the country, which tend to sort of have more of a blue collar sort of white collar sort of I suppose attractiveness to people, and they're in the lower end of the sort of the price range, shall we say, for properties, but generally that's the most crowded area when it comes to resale and obviously finding buyers for them. So there's less risk involved with that as well. But me personally, my sort of ethos is rent where you want to live and buy where you can afford.
Yep, makes sense. No point servicing the bank, because why would you tie yourself down for that 30, 40 years?
I mean, a 30-year term, it's just a chain around your neck that you're never really going to get out of.
Yeah, for sure. I think start with what you're saying, where it's affordable, and reach higher.
It doesn't mean you have to stay there. Obviously, like the very first purchase I bought was $400,000. Like that obviously is a lot of money to a lot of people, but for me, I could afford that. So I was like, right, okay, I wasn't really excited by it. It's not something that's sort of shiny and sexy, but it was a starting point, and you sort of use that as a building block, and then you move up from there and you progress up the ladder and you start buying bigger sort of assets, and eventually once you get to a point where you're building enough assets in there, you can then start looking at bigger projects after that as well, which is now what I'm starting to do. So I'm starting to transition from residential real estate into commercial real estate.
have you started on a commercial estate
I'm
investing?
still in the process of actually purchasing my first one, but it will happen in the next 3 to 6 months. Yeah.
And your advice is maybe speak to the right people. Yeah. In
I
the
would say
commercial
get the right
space.
team around you. Like I haven't been investing in real estate for that long, but I've found that having the right people around you that can give you the right advice. There's a lot of people out there that will give you advice. Whether that advice is right for you or right in general is not always the case, unfortunately, because the financial industry, especially when it comes to buyers agents and things like that, is very unregulated. So just find the right person, and I would say just interview as many of those people first before you sign on the dotted line and make that final decision.
How did you stumble across your buyer's agent?
With mine, like it was initially it was Google, which is I think where everyone sort of starts, and then from there it was a bit of word of mouth and a bit of sort of insider sort of knowledge, meeting people and speaking to these people that was already in the industry and going, look, we've got like my first buyers agencies that I dealt with, it was just two young guys that literally started up, very passionate about it, and they wanted to help the average person. And their ethos was, I think, literally buy 1,000 houses for 1,000 Australians, and I was like, I like that. Like that, it was genuine. Some people you meet and they're not really that genuine. So yeah, and that happens, and that has happened to me as well, where I've been burnt and I've had to walk away from a decent amount of money as well. That has happened to me. Yeah. So you have to be very careful.
Yeah.
Pick your team wisely.
What do you do when you get burnt?
Just got to take it on the chin and sort of like it's part of it's the same as being in business and something happening to your business, you have to close it down or whatever, or you have bad months, you have good months. I think it's the same in life in general. You have experiences, and I always sort of say my sort of saying is they're not losses, they're lessons. So you've just got to learn from that and literally learn to trust again, I suppose, and like I said, yeah, find the right people around you. If you don't have the right advice, you're not going to get the best results.
What's the worst investment you've ever made that you're oddly proud of?
I would say watches. Like I'm really proud of my watch collection that I've got now, but like yeah, literally when I first started I had no idea, and I just got very lucky with it. And historically over the last 10 years they've actually outperformed the stock market and property.
I like to see your watch collection.
Yeah.
When we have a moment.
Yeah.
Can you share the most ridiculous business advice you've ever received?
The most ridiculous advice I would probably say is save yourself rich. I would say that's probably the most ridiculous advice, because some people will do that, and it's generally cheap people that do that. And I did start doing that initially, and I didn't see any growth from that. So it was a ridiculous sort of piece of advice that I received. Yeah.
I just think you can't cut out the avocado. Like you can't cut out coffee.
No.
Yeah, you can't just save yourself to
you can't do that. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Having things like basically making that decision on a daily basis of, oh, I can't have my coffee today, or doing whatever it is. They're $3 questions. Like you shouldn't really be asking yourself those questions. It should be about what's my savings rate, what am I basically contributing every month to my retirement fund, or what am I contributing to my investment fund, or whatever it needs to be.
Yeah, I think to think about how to gain $3,000 instead of like penny pinching.
Yeah.
Like let's save $3.
Yeah. It makes no sense.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree that much better to think about income streams.
Definitely.
Than to focus on where can I save.
And I think the best advice that I ever received was literally sanity over vanity, which is a very old age sort of like term, obviously, but it's true. Don't get sort of fixated on the shiny sort of sexy objects. Go to your everyday sort of like places that are going to give you that most value. Yes, they might be a bit boring and they might be slow to return the money that you want, but they're the ones that make the money over the long term.
They say that sell things. A lot of people make their millions on selling not so sexy things. You know, like I don't know, grapefruit, toilet paper.
Yeah.
Right. It's just not like the
everyday
luxurious
essentials.
things that we see.
I mean, you can make money from those, but obviously it's how much you're going to make from it, and is that sustainable over a long term? Probably not.
How much money would you want to prepare in order to retire on a remote island?
On a remote island, I don't think I'd really need much of us on a remote island, but like, because obviously you can fish in the sea and you can drink from the coconuts in the trees, and but I think in an everyday sort of situation, if I wasn't on a remote island, which would be amazing, obviously. But I would say just whatever makes you comfortable. So it really depends on the person's lifestyle before they go to retire. So I would say if you're earning $50,000 a year and you're content with $50,000 a year, then that would be your number. If your lifestyle is a bit more extravagant and you've got more sort of outgoings, I suppose, and you have a different taste of how you want to live, then that might be $200,000. Everyone's different. It could be $500,000. All I would say from that is literally work backwards from that. So you work backwards from that number, and that's all I did with my investment strategy when I first started. It was like, how much money do I need to survive if I was to stop work tomorrow? And then you just sort of work backwards from there. So whether that be investments into businesses, into property, into commercial, into obviously watches are not asset producing, but like income producing assets. But yeah, it's something that you can you just got to work backwards from your numbers. It's not a difficult thing. Like, people overcomplicate that, I think, I would say.
It's a logical way of looking at it.
Yeah.
You know, I thought it was pretty cool that you said, let's just get some coconuts off a tree and do some fishing.
Yeah.
Start off with.
Why not?
Yeah,
and then work from there.
Yeah,
and
we'll
see how big your hut needs to be after that.
I like the fact that you said work backwards. Like, if $200,000 is what you think is a lifestyle you want, then how do you get there?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Now, what financial trend do you think is overrated? Some people think crypto and NFTs.
Yeah, I mean, with those, I'm not really too familiar with sort of crypto and NFTs, and I do know people that have lost money on those and made money as well. But yeah, I think probably dollar cost averaging is my biggest. It's not really a trend, but it's sort of a buzzword that people sort of throw around. And I think unless you can be very disciplined in your investment ethos and the way that you actually approach that, then I don't think that works for most people. Because obviously trying to eke out an hour of your time every week or every month to like sort of take that money out of your account and invest it back into something else, I don't think that really works for the majority of people, or majority of people are not disciplined enough to actually follow that. I think if you can take your money and either take it pre-tax in the form of obviously super contributions, or if you can invest into an index fund like say a Vanguard broad-based income index fund, and you can just push your money into that every month and let them do that job for you, I think that's probably a better option than actually trying to take the money out yourself and do it that way.
Australia does reward you taking pre-income tax.
Yeah.
Into super, and they tax you a bit less. Is UK something?
It's similar, but because I haven't really worked that much in that market, like I'd assume it's very similar to that. Yes. Yeah.
You also mentioned that you worked a little bit in Greece.
Yeah.
And a little bit in America. Must be quite interesting to cover so many different countries.
Yeah. I just like meeting different people and learning about different cultures and meeting new people, I suppose.
You ultimately settled in Australia because Specsavers said
it's mainly my business that's tied me here and anchored me here, and now I'm sort of in Melbourne, obviously because it's just a business that's sustained itself for the last 12 years, and it will continue to sustain itself for however long, and that's probably where I see myself sort of short to medium term at least anyway.
Is there a money saving tip that sounds good in theory but often fails in practice?
Money saving? Yeah, no coffees and avocado on toast. I think asking those type of questions for someone is a bit difficult. Like, trying to sort of cut all of those things out of your life, I don't think it works. And that's getting back to what we were talking about before with the 4 bucket rule. You need some money that you need for yourself, because if you have all of them other things set up in the first place and they're all ticking away in the background and you're sort of taking your money out every week and it's all obviously scheduled within your accounts, then you need to enjoy your money as well. Like, it's not all about spreadsheets and numbers, like and what am I going to live on when I retire. It's about being in the moment as well, and obviously having that extra money there that you can spend on yourself. Don't kill yourself trying to save all of this money. Like, you see these people that sort of live at home and live in a basement and stuff, trying to save money to buy a house or whatever it may be, or save up for something like that. That to me makes no sense. Like, you're not living in the moment, you're not enjoying the process and enjoying the journey as well.
So like, identify the needs and the wants. Like, what can you still enjoy a little bit, but not frivolously waste resources? But But it's not about just saving.
No, I think 10 to 20% of your income, if you can enjoy that part of it, then I think that's definitely something that's sustainable for most people. But if they don't have that set up in the first place, most people don't even understand how much money they actually earn and how much money they spend. You have to sort of, you might have to take a bit of time away from that and sort of work it all out, but once you've got your numbers, you know your numbers, and then you can sort of work backwards from there. And it's the same thing as before, knowing what you need and working backwards from there.
What's the most interesting pitch you've ever received for a business idea? Or boring ones?
Yeah, I haven't really seen many interesting ones. I'd probably invest in those if I got some interesting ones. Boring ones is like your usual sort of like buy a business, employ some people, and obviously, just sort of take the earnings from it. I would love people to pitch me on certain ideas and definitely be involved with that. But yeah, usual sort of stuff like your tag and testing, like sort of rental businesses, buying laundromats, stuff like that. That's boring sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, even that type of stuff, you'll make money from it. But yeah, no, I haven't had any interesting ones, no. Which I would like some though. If you've got some, I'm happy to share.
Let me think about it. I've got some interesting ones, and I wouldn't mind your opinion on it. Yeah. For a later date.
Okay.
If you had to start a new business, let's say with $1,000 or minimal funds, and let's say you can go back a few years, let's say in your 20s, what would you choose to do other than the optical retail?
So I could take my knowledge that I've got now and go back in time.
Yeah, take a knowledge.
Yeah. Yep. I would probably say now I see the most probably opportunity in social media, because the cost of entry to market is so little that you can literally set up a Shopify, like you can set up a shop online, you can build yourself a website for next to nothing, you can build your funnel through social media, so whether that be Instagram, TikTok, wherever it comes from, build your funnel from there, and sort of you can funnel your customers into that with probably about $1,000. I would say you might not even need that, to be honest. Like you've got all these free apps that are out there now. But yeah, for me, I'll probably go on social media, find the niche and find people's pain points and work backwards from there and go, right, okay, well, can I solve this problem? Is this something that most people want to buy, or is it going to fix a lot of people's problems? If it's just going to fix your own problem, that's not going to work, obviously. And I think a lot of people in business, they sort of get fixated on their own little problems, and that's why most businesses fail as well, because it's not a broad-based business.
Like maybe find a problem that people need assistance with, and then
like your general sort of stuff with social media is usually fitness, motivation, and then you've got sort of your I suppose supplements and things like that people go into as well. But yeah, I would say most of them sort of things, find the niche and sort of work at that.
Are you one to like multitask or invest in multiple things or start multiple businesses, or you like to focus on one, really master one before you jump out and start another one?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Like I'm invested in multiple things, but it didn't happen all at once. So for me, like I'm very much, I like to focus on one thing, learn about that sort of subject matter first, invest into it, get to a certain number. So like for me, I'm very numbers orientated. So for me, I would look at, say, an investment into property, for instance, and I would say, right, my sort of cut-off point may be $2 million in this particular project. Invest that $2 million and then move on to the next thing. Let that thing do its thing, because once you've worked out your numbers and you know it can sustain itself, then you can go, right, okay, I don't have to worry about that anymore, and then become an expert in another field. And you don't have to be an expert in everything, you just have to be an expert in a few that generate you enough money so that you can live off that. But yeah, like for myself, I'm in property, I'm into shares, I'm into obviously business, and then obviously alternative assets as well.
Any particular shares you could recommend the audience to go?
I would probably say start and I was actually having this conversation today with someone, like literally start with an index fund. So start with some type of ETF structure. So an ETF is basically a basket of companies. Maybe that might be the S&P 500, or it might be the ASX 200. Start with what you know and buy those, and start obviously putting money into those on a monthly basis. So either through Vanguard, iShares, BlackRock. any of those sort of companies have got these structures in place. Invest into those. My sort of favourites, I would say, is probably IVV, which is the broad-based S&P 500. Another one which is a really good one as well, which is accessible for Australians, is VGS. VGS basically, I think, he's invested into about 3,500 companies. That's a very diversified portfolio, including like mega caps and small caps. And then another one I would probably say is maybe VEU. So VEU is basically everything outside of the US. And again, it's a Vanguard fund, so you can literally invest in those on a monthly basis, put your money into it, a bit like a super setup, and like literally just invest your money and don't worry about it, just forget about it.
What's the percentage? You mentioned, 20%, you pay yourself 10%,
Yeah.
50% go to expenses.
20% goes into investment.
20%
Yeah, so 20% of income goes into investment.
Per month?
Per month, yeah.
Now, what's the most regrettable decision you've ever made towards trying to increase revenue in your business ventures and investments?
Probably saving myself rich as well. So it's the same thing. It comes back to trying to save yourself money. It's never going to work.
Yeah.
So finding those right people in the right position and finding the right people to do them jobs, I would say that's probably my most regrettable thing. Like trying to save myself throughout that process has never worked.
What about any not so great partnerships? Have you always started a business yourself, or have you partnered with someone?
So I've had, prior to this business, I've had 2 businesses. One was with a partnership, one wasn't. The one with the partnership worked great. The one on my own didn't work so well. And again, it's because I'm trying to do everything myself, and you can't do everything yourself. Like you've got to be, like there's this fallacy of people that are successful within business, they're successful at every aspect of that, and that's not really how it works. Like you'll find that you're really good at certain things. Like for myself, my own journey, I really enjoy, I might not be the best at it, but I really enjoy developing people and training people. That's my passion. Not really the fact of selling stuff to people. It's more training people and developing them and seeing what they can become, and building a culture around that within the business so that they can flourish within that environment. But yeah, trying to do everything yourself, it will never work.
I made a note that I think it's really gracious of you as a leader, of your business to go and pass on knowledge to your staff members in Specsavers.
Yeah.
Yeah, to the people that have just joined you, joined the team, etc., etc. So, do you often give advice because people have asked you?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. So I've got certain team members that like may come up to me and ask me for certain ideas, a bit like yourself, like sort of saying which stocks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't really like giving that type of information, but like that's just what I know, so that's what I'm invested in. So I wouldn't spruik something that I'm not invested in. So for myself, yeah, I would say it's stuff that I know and I'm comfortable talking about with people, like on a regular basis. Well, not on a regular basis, but for Christmas, for instance, it's sort of I'll give them finance books, or I might give them like maybe send them a podcast to listen to or something like that, and just sort of try and spark their interest within finance, because a lot of young people don't really think about it until it's too late, and you've got too many responsibilities on your plate. Family comes along, kids come along, whatever it may be, and yeah, like people sort of forget about the investing side of it. And I think the earlier you start, the better you are later in life. And compounding is a magnificent thing.
Now, the biggest risk you ever took?
The biggest risk, I suppose, was buying my current business, because prior to us buying it, I didn't find this out until a couple of years into the purchase, but after purchase, but they was actually going to close our business. And if we wouldn't have bought that business when we did, 3 months later it would have closed its doors forever. So yeah, that wasn't making any money, and that was a risk, because obviously at the time it was about $280,000 in debt, and we didn't know if we was going to be able to get out of that hole. It took us probably about 3 years or so, or maybe a little bit less than 3 years, to pay that off and obviously start paying ourselves. But yeah, that was probably my biggest risk, but it was also my biggest reward as well.
The one business mistake that you'll never forget?
Biggest business mistake.
Like maybe head office said, try this plan, but you thought about something different.
Yeah.
But then it didn't pan out very well.
Business mistake. That's probably something that I've never really I don't really tend to dwell on stuff too much, to be honest. I'm not one of them people where it's sort of stuff doesn't work out, just move on. I mean, even in my current position that I'm in now, I've been offered other businesses, and then there's been times where I've been really, really interested in buying into another business, and the partnership doesn't really fit. But it's something that I'm really, really interested in buying into. And yeah, with those, I wouldn't say it's a regret as such, but I would say it's definitely something that I've sort of learned how to approach things differently. And I think it's probably my approach that sort of not made those partnerships move forward.
Yes.
I wouldn't say it's biggish. No, it's different sort of stuff that people have sort of come to me about, and the partnership just wouldn't work. And I think that's probably. I wouldn't say there's one particular thing. I think again, it's just lessons from that, of knowing how to sort of gauge people and how to approach that partnership moving forward.
Are you comfortable? Are you one of these business owners, when you make assessments, that would like to know about figures and facts first? You know, like, could you inject $100,000 first, and then I give you shares of the company, and then we go from there? Or are you more like, I need to know who I'm working with? Can the person come and talk to you about, you know, how the idea came about, what concepts, where they like to take the business, what goals? So do you assess on figures? Like, is it important to you for them to let you know about facts and figures? Like, what money are you hoping to make?
Facts and figures are important. They're definitely important, because numbers don't lie. But I think partnership is the more important thing for me. So like, if I can actually work with this person and trust this person to move forward in that business, because numbers are numbers. So if you see the numbers and it makes sense financially, then obviously yes, you're always going to go ahead. But you can be in those situations, and the business might be making money, but if you're not happy with that partnership for whatever reason, then you're not really going to enjoy the process of it. So I would say partnership's more important than the actual business itself. It's whether the people are going to be able to work together.
Now, the best advice that you've ever received about money was what?
Best advice about money? I would say the best advice for money is pretty much live below your means. I would say it's probably the best advice. And again, it's sort of like a bit of a boring sort of saying, I suppose. But yeah, live below your means and invest the rest.
Yeah. Like, initially,
Definitely.
maybe don't splurge.
Exactly.
Until you know that your retirement is funded clearly, and your family's covered, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Now, we have one last segment, which is a keynote speaker that I came across called Matt Barry. I thought some of the points he made is super interesting about current economic climate.
Okay.
Maybe globally or just Australia related. But this is something that a lot of people resonate with. So if I could get you to have a listen to this first one.
With gross household disposable incomes falling 6.1% in the worst per capita recession since the Great Depression. Once upon a time, we believed in the great Australian dream, where home ownership could lead to a better life and was an expression of success and security. That dream is now impossible for the average person, not because of one's lack of talent, skill or ability, but because of simple mathematics. In Sydney now, it took last month 46 years to save for an average house deposit, not the house, the deposit. Actually, with the latest numbers that came out, it's probably over 50. So if you start saving at 20, you'll have enough money for a deposit by the age of 70. But of course, by then, the house will have a zero on its price tag. The great Australian dream has become a great Australian scream. No longer do Australians have a fair go. Once upon a time, we believed in the great Australian dream, where home ownership could lead to a better
Basically,
life.
this snippet pretty much is saying housing affordability is not really bad.
Yeah.
How do you see that trend?
It's always going to go up. Housing has always been unaffordable to a lot of people. I mean, yeah, we're in that situation now where housing, like he says on there, is 17 years just to afford a deposit. Like me personally, I don't think a house is actually a good investment. Personally, I don't think it's a good investment, purely because it's good for some people if it's forced savings, and obviously it's a forced sort of way of making sure that you're I suppose your savings is secure in the future. But from an affordability point of view, yeah, I don't think it's going to get any better. And I think if anything, it's just an age-old problem that we're always going to have. Problem is with that is, where do these people live, and how are we going to house these people? Because there's always people influxing into Australia. So yeah, it's always going to be a problem, unfortunately. But yeah, personally, I wouldn't buy a house for myself. I don't personally own a house that I live in, and I don't plan to buy a house that I'm going to live in the future. Maybe at one stage I will do, because it's an emotional decision, but it's not a financial decision. So, and from an emotional perspective, it makes sense because it's all warm and fuzzy and it's somewhere for you to live and it's nice and safe. But from an actual financial position, it's probably one of the worst financial decisions you can make in regards to actually investing into something, because that money could be used for so much more, and you can leverage that money so much more if you're buying an investment versus buying somewhere to live. That's my personal view, obviously.
Which flows on to the next segment.
Yeah.
You could quickly have a listen.
Government policies are destroying the ability for young Australians to not just own a home, but also destroying their ability to have kids. It's obvious to say it, but research demonstrates that couples in single-family homes show significantly higher fertility rates than those in apartments, even years after moving. Surprise, surprise. Spacious, family-friendly housing environments encourage childbearing. So if we have policies that promote affordable access to larger family-orientated housing, we will likely get higher fertility levels. Conversely, economic pressures that force families into smaller apartments will likely suppress fertility rates. To not just own a home.
It's interesting that his take was, the smaller space, like apartments, as opposed to standalone homes. It's so much smaller to raise children in. And so he made the comparison there and saying, people are not choosing to have kids because of the pressure.
Yeah, and I would say that's probably correct as well. Like, people are choosing not to, or they're having them later in life, and by then sometimes it's too late, so the fertility may be dropping from that aspect as well. Yeah, I think it is a stress for a lot of people. Like, even personally, I didn't want to have a child unless I could afford it. So for me, like, I waited, and obviously, yeah, we've sort of waited for a certain period of time, and it just sort of happened that obviously we were stable. But yeah, would I have one at, say, 20 years old? No, I wouldn't. So yeah, there's different aspects to that, I would say. There's different elements to that I suppose, statement that you can argue for and against. But yeah, I think it's true. Like, people are waiting because of the cost of living in general is too high to even think about education. I mean, if you look at education, what is it from birth to 18 is something like close to £180,000, I think it is, something like that for a standard education. Anything more than that, you're looking at sort of close to $500,000 if you're looking at private schools. So yeah, it's a big financial burden for a lot of families.
For sure, and that's only one child.
Exactly.
So if you have another one and a third one, then
it can definitely add up. Definitely, yeah.
One last and final segment.
His girlfriend on New Year's Eve. If you remember, the government's going crazy gaslighting the public that violence had spiralled out of control. I thought, hang on, hadn't George Soros, the tourism minister, proclaimed that Sydney has just won the safest and friendliest city in the world award? Both tragedies, sure, but how does that justify shutting down this entire city's nightlife? The truth soon emerged. It was never about our welfare, but rather a desire for casino patronage and to clear the way for property development. All to demolish for apartments, but apartments for who exactly? Hold on to that thought, we'll come back to that later. Now drama dogs are every step. Australia Day sparks outrage, global events become local crises. We've become a nation on edge where calm is the exception and conflict is the new normal. Our spirit of rebellion and irreverence, the very essence of what it means to be Australian, has been crushed by a deluge of stupid laws, rules and regulations. No Australian actually wants any of this crap, yet the government keeps ramming it down our throats.
Yeah, so we have this thing in Sydney where there's like lockdown rules.
Okay.
Like, after a certain amount of time, all businesses have to shut down. But what this keynote speaker is saying, it's to pave way, to developers knocking
Okay.
down these businesses because they can't survive without having that nightlife. And to build more apartments on, which somewhat also ties into the first segment, which is can't afford, but they want to develop more.
Yeah.
So it's like this cycle of like the top few percent of people making the money,
Of course.
but the average Australian can't afford.
Yeah. I think it all sort of ties together perfectly.
Yeah.
Obviously, like at the end of the day, someone's making money out of this. Who is making money? Generally, it's a developer. Developers don't necessarily need to sell all of their properties or sell all of their development to make their profit back. So for them, it doesn't really matter, I suppose, like in regards to whether they sell them all or whether they don't sell them all. From a obviously economical point of view, is it worth actually building these cookie cutter apartments? Probably not, because it's not a great lifestyle for most people to have. Like, yeah, I know we're sort of moving more towards them high-rise sort of apartment buildings, and people are sort of happy to live in these high density sort of buildings, but is it really the best lifestyle for everyone? Probably not. It's more sedentary, you're sort of more isolated. Yeah, it's not a great place to be, I would say, and especially if, for instance, you have another lockdown, then that's definitely not a place where you want to be. Psychologically, I'm sure it's definitely got some impacts on people, and I think long lasting, I think it will do as well. From a development point of view, yeah, I don't think it's the right way to go, but yeah, we don't make the rules, I suppose, do we?
But thank you for sharing all your experiences with the audience, and even though we have trends that are somewhat, I think a lot of us feel helpless on, but there's individuals like yourself that are so mindful of what it takes to succeed and what it takes to run the business, and working 7 days a week, like at the beginning, to keep going. To keep the business afloat, and I'm curious to see, like I said, your watch collection, and hopefully a chance to talk about future investment ideas.
I think my biggest message to people is bet on yourself. Don't be afraid to not bet on yourself, because you'd be surprised what you can actually get out of it. Like there's a really sort of mindful quote that I love, and it's literally, how big would you dream if you knew you couldn't fail? And it's like, just go for it. Just if you've got a dream, go for it, do it. Because what's the worst that can happen? You're back in stage one again 2 years later, 3 years later, when it hasn't worked out, but at least you can go through life not saying what if.
Yes. And not wonder.
No, and you can't do that. Life's too short. You've got to take them risks sometimes.
Yeah. So onwards and upwards for your business, and hopefully Specsavers is, there to stay. Under your wing.
I'd like to think so, yeah.
And looking forward to our next conversation.
Okay, cool.
So thank you for coming on, and
Thank you again.